Welcome to another founder-to-founder interview from Gun.io, your source for hiring world-class tech talent. Today, Gun.io's CEO and co-founder Teja sits down with Brandon Bayer of Flightcontrol, a platform designed for teams that want the benefits of AWS infrastructure without having to hire DevOps. Okay, here's Teja.
All right, so you're in Ohio or based in the Bay?
In Dayton, Ohio, birthplace of the Wright brothers.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and you went to Wright, right, for school.
Wright State, yes.
Okay, cool. Have you always been, I guess you kind of grew up, given that it is the birthplace of the Wright brothers, interested in aviation? Or is that like a
I think I literally flew out of the womb. Aviation has been like in my cells, every cell of my body since I was like a kid.
That's cool. Do you fly
I do.
As a hobby? Okay.
Yes, I have my pilot's license since I got it when I was 17. Started training when I was 15, and bought my first airplane earlier this year.
Wow. Okay, that's sick. What'd you end up buying?
It's called a Harmon Rocket.
Okay.
It's a two-seat tail dragger, so it sits back kind of like the old-fashioned planes. It looks like a stunt plane. In fact, it kind of is. It used to be a race plane. It's aerobatic, and it'll cruise about 230 miles per hour.
Damn, this looks sick. That's pretty dope. That's cool. I've taken like a couple of lessons in a
nice.
Cessna.
That's
That's it. And it's always like, at least for me, it was like crazy that the instructor's like, all right, dude, here you go. And you're like, what? This is my first hour, in a plane. And you're like, okay, cool. But that's really sweet. So so I think it takes 100 hours to get your license or something like that.
You need a minimum of 40. The
40,
average is
okay.
more like 70 to 80.
When did you feel fully comfortable, flying by yourself?
Like the first time I got on a plane.
No shit. Okay. That's how you know that it's that you're meant to do it, right?
I was 8 years old reading aircraft manuals from the library, spent tons of time on a flight simulator as a kid. And so by the time I got in the real thing, I was like, oh, this is I know what I'm doing.
Gotcha. Did you do it when you were 8? When's the earliest you can get a pilot's license?
So you can take flying lessons at any age. To be a glider pilot, you can be a glider pilot at 14.
Oh, wow.
And you have to be a fully certified pilot for with an engine, need to be 17.
Okay, got it. As far as your company culture, do you make people get interested in aviation? I'm just curious.
No, I would love to. Maybe someday it'll be a perk of you will pay for your pilot's license or something.
Yeah, I know. I always have to thread the needle carefully. How much am I imposing my own interests and hobbies on the team? Because I'm I like these things. They make me feel awesome and they're cool. So you should do them. But I don't know. It's thematic to your company though. So maybe there's an argument.
Yeah.
Did you in your head? Did you have an idea if I want to start a company, it's gonna have an aviation theme to it? Did you have this name ready or just kind of emerged organically?
No.
You're always curious. Okay.
I always I like to have fun. And so I wanted to do a business that, would be fun and have a theme or whatever. So this was back in 2021, we were getting ready to do our pre-launch. So we put up a landing page. We didn't have the product, nothing. Just going to be a landing page, sort of outlining the vision and collecting emails for people who are interested, and also pre-selling early access for $20. And so we were going to do this launch on Monday. We were fundraising. We were we got to do this. And it was Saturday night and we still didn't have a name. We're having all these ideas and they're just dumb. And Saturday night I was driving down the highway and I saw a billboard said flight on it. I think it was about beer, a flight of beer. And I was flight. I was flight control. I was wait, that's actually pretty awesome because we're not we're not a hosting provider. We don't run servers. We're air traffic control for all your servers and your infrastructure. And I was oh, that's pretty cool. And like there was a domain available, and like there wasn't any other companies like really named that, and I was like, okay, here we go.
And like what I love about it is it's like it's a really unique metaphor for like the problem that you guys are solving, and I always feel like those are like the dopest, like most resonant like brands. You know, it's like a new cut into the way like the problem is being solved. That's what makes it, you know, that's really cool. And that's like a nice segue into like the actual company. So like tell us about the company, like how you kind of got started. You went through YC. How was that experience? Like give us like the full rundown. Because there's a ton of devs in the network that are going to listen, probably want to start their own company. You know what I mean? Like big PG fans, like all that shit. So they'd love to hear all that.
Oh, yeah. I first read, how I first got interested in like running my own business was I read a book called Getting Real by the Basecamp folks. This was like, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago.
Back in the day.
Yeah. And I was like, you know, I was in a boring corporate environment, whatever. And I read this book and my mind was like blown of like, whoa, like you can like have a software company with a small amount of people that like building a product that is, you can build with a lot of care and intentionality and like have fun doing it and not have all this bureaucracy and stuff. And I was like, okay, I'm going to have my own company someday.
So
I didn't know how or what. And so I had some side projects along the way. I had an iOS app that got up to like $4,000 or $5,000 per month in revenue. Ended up selling it off for like $30K to someone else.
That's sick.
Did some consulting and was like hacking on various stuff, but I never feel like I had a really great idea. And then I was so I had learned web programming through Ruby on Rails, but then I fell in love with JavaScript and React, and I really missed that Ruby on Rails developer experience. And so one day I was like, I realized that like I'd been wanting a Rails for JavaScript and React. And one day I realized that Next.js and Prisma, this was back in 2020, beginning of 2020, I realized that these two could kind of fit together in like this sort of experience that I wanted.
Yeah.
And so this was the birth of Blitz JS, which is a massive open source project. And I like had the idea and wrote a few hundred lines of prototype code. And 1 week later, launched it on Twitter, and the tweet went viral for a product that didn't even exist. But I did that on purpose. You'll kind of see a pattern here because I wanted to make sure that people would actually want this before I invested a lot of time in it. So like the worst thing you can do is spend 6 months or a year building something and then launch it and nobody cares.
Like, did you do anything to make the tweet go viral? Like, were you strategic about that, or you just like, I'm gonna put it out there? And
I got on the dark net and just like, no, I'm kidding. So what I did was, I used marketing skills, which most devs don't have a lot of, but it is super important. Like whether you're trying to get a job or like market your own ideas inside a company, like marketing is super important. And really it just means knowing what other people care about and communicating to that thing that they care about. And so I just clearly like communicated the value that this thing was going to provide and like what the change, how it was going to improve their daily life. And it just really tapped into a bunch of pent-up demand for some more simplicity, this like faster dev experience. And so I didn't create the demand. I noticed it and I tapped into it.
So how did Flight Control emerge from Blitz JS?
So Blitz was like a detour because it's not a business. It's an open source project. I got a couple $1,000s a month in sponsorships, but like that's, not that much.
That's still
in the
sick.
Western world.
Like, yeah, but you say that, but like a lot of people are like, holy shit, like this man just made like money using his mind, not at a job. Like that's actually really fucking cool. Yeah. That to me, going from 0 to like a couple hundred per month is sometimes even cooler than like scaling 1 million to 2 or 10 million to 20. Like this, like you just do the same shit better. That's it, Yes.
So it was a detour. But I knew that I would probably build some kind of service around it, some kind of company around it. But like the thing that was like, I did not expect was how much I loved building this developer tool and like how much people liked what I built. Like I realized I had a good knack for building good developer experience and also marketing it. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm building developer tools now. Like this is who I am. And the other big problem I had was, I care a tremendous amount about good developer experience and ease of use. And so I'm like using Vercel or these sort of platform as a service, but I kept running into too many limitations. And I was like, why can't I need to use some AWS services? I want the power of AWS, the control. Why can't I have the good developer experience on my own AWS account? And that is really what created this. And so like we are like fundamentally changing companies' relationship with infrastructure. Like in the past, AWS has been too intimidating and complex for like devs to really manage, right?
Oh, totally.
And so then that pushes you to settle for a crippled platform as a service abstraction or hire DevOps.
Right.
And so we are building developer first AWS infrastructure that is designed for developers to easily use AWS. In fact, we're aiming to make AWS delightful.
That's cool. And it's a noble mission. I know this because we shifted from Heroku to AWS, and it's a whole thing I can tell you about offline.
Yes.
You know, so, and you know this problem intimately, so maybe I need to connect you with our CTO.
Yes. Heroku, like it's wild, but Heroku has an incident every 6 days on average, according to their public status page over the past year.
Yeah. And struggling. Yeah. That and many other things. It's like, I checked out like your LinkedIn profile, and you have the most positive recommendations from people that have worked for you. And in some cases, not have worked for you, but like just like you as a dude. And so I think this is actually like a lot of engineers talk about wanting to skill up, maybe in the people management dimension or in the like leadership, soft skills dimension. Like, how did you maybe develop that? Is that something that you sort of were naturally gifted at? Maybe just some comments about that would be super interesting.
Honestly, I think most of it stems from my Christian faith. And like that has like, number one, like I've like God of the Bible is like so good and so loving and so kind, and it just like overwhelms me constantly. And so that just becomes a part of who I am and how I treat other people. And so I think like the core thing, whether you like have a Christian faith or not, is just genuinely care about other people. Like I find that so often companies can be like, some of the most hyped companies can be like, oh yeah, like they're like the best, we're like the most elite, whatever. And they kind of give the idea that they care about you, but at the end of the day, they really don't care about you. All they care about is themselves.
Right.
And like, that's going to come through every time. Like maybe you get along with them for a while, but eventually you're going to see through it.
You hear some crazy stories about these high growth companies and like how they operate, and you just kind of wonder like how they came to those sets of decisions. So, I mean, I assume that your parents are Christian and like they imbued you sort of as a child.
Like I was aware of that. But like I did not like follow the Christian faith until I was like 19 or something. Like I was just doing whatever. Right.
Interesting.
But I came to a moment where like I realized that like I needed God. Like I just like knew I could just feel this way of like, I am not okay. Like I need something better. I need more life. I need more love, more whatever, that relationship. And that is, that is really like the core of who I am and what makes me how I am.
That's cool. How did you come to that conclusion?
I mean, so I think then like I had the teaching, I had the knowledge, right? But then I had this experience, this personal experience that like I can't necessarily explain, but I just like knew that like I was like dead inside and I needed to be alive. And so, since then, like my faith has varied over the years. And sometimes you're just like, you think about it logically and it's like, does this really make sense? Like, is this just dumb or whatever? But the experiences that I have is like, no one can tell me that God is not real. Like it is just so real to me. If it's not real to someone else, okay, it's fine. But for me, it's just like my life is so much better.
Cool, man. Yeah, one of our key team members, actually like I would call him like my co-founder at this stage. He's been with us for so long. He's he's quite religious, and like I'm pretty profane. Like I grew up in New York, and like I'm not very religious, and so I always like feel bad if I swear around him. I mean, he's obviously very cool about it, but it's like, dude, you're so good. He never swears ever. So like we're in the same room and I'm saying all this shit, and you know he's maintaining composure. I'm like, oh, okay, that makes me feel bad.
Like I don't care like how other people act. Like if someone else's behavior is affecting me, like that's my problem, not theirs. Like
that's true.
I don't care what you say or how you act. Like whatever, I don't care. Like
that's true, but that's compassion, which is probably taught by your framework and worldview, right? So
yeah,
that's cool. That's awesome, man. So how big is your team now? Like what's the composition of Flight Control?
So I have co-founder and CTO.
Cool.
Mina.
Cool.
He's the most amazing person in the world. Like 2 years in, we're like the best friends. We actually didn't meet in person until 6 months after we formed the company. Like I met him online. It's crazy. That's kind of a whole nother story. But then we have 3 other full-time engineers and an intern engineer, and then a developer advocate.
That's cool. Okay.
So we're 7 total, including the intern.
Cool. Small and mighty. That's the way to be. Yes. I mean, that's a 37 Signals way. Yeah, I love that. I love that. Minimal bureaucracy, minimal process to align things, just lean. Obviously, you should share the story of how you met your co-founder.
Yeah. So we were knew of each other through an online entrepreneur community called Mega Maker.
Okay. Cool.
It's focused on like bootstrappers. And so we kind of knew of each other in there. And then when I created Blitz JS, he came in and helped just a little bit at the beginning of that, because I got a bunch of people all over the world to help build that thing. And then I'd kind of been tweeting some vague thoughts about this flight control idea, but like not that direct. And this was in 2021, early 2021. I was like, one day I was deciding what is the actual business I'm going to build now out of a couple of different options.
Yep.
And I decided flight control is going to be this one. And the very next day, he DMs me on Twitter out of the blue. Like we had never really had a one-on-one conversation. And he's like, hey, I'm thinking about this deploy to AWS thing. And like kind of described exactly what I was going to build. And he's like, do you want to partner on it? I'm like, what the heck? Like, who are you? Like, I don't even know. Like I treat a co-foundership like a marriage. Like it's a very serious,
right.
I need to make sure that you are like, we have very aligned core values, like all this stuff. But I was like, we have to talk. And we just really hit it off. Like we're just super aligned on personal core values and also company and product vision.
That's pretty rad. That's cool. What are some of the personal core values you guys are aligned on? And like, how did you determine that you guys were aligned?
One, we both have a Christian faith.
Cool.
And so like that already kind of like aligns a lot of the worldview.
There's a lot of alignment nested within that one thing. Yep, for sure.
Secondly, we both like wanted to build a legacy. Like we both have felt like this just tremendous amount of potential that we have in us that we hadn't really been to realize in the world. And now we're getting to do that together. And we both had like just that same vision for the product that we wanted to solve. And I came more at it from the platform as a service side. He came at it more from the AWS side. And so it's like a crazy, cool match. Like, don't get me wrong. There's been tough times. We've had some really tough conversations, whatever. But like we worked through those, and now like we have just such a strong mutual understanding that we hardly ever have any hard conversations anymore. And so often, like I'll like one or the other will bring up something like, hey, like I need to talk about this thing, and the other one's like, yeah, I was already thinking about that.
Dude, you know, that happens with me and Tyler. And the funny thing is sometimes I have to go to him and be like, dude, are we like suffering from groupthink? Because this feels too easy. Like I almost have to go and seek out like a contrary opinion because we're too aligned. Like, I don't know if you ever feel like that. I'm like, wait, are we both, like we both have the same priors. And so we're both arriving at the same idea. Like we need to get some contrary opinion here. That's at least, I don't know. That's like, it's interesting. Because yeah, in the early days, you're like having conflict about things and you're trying to find the right way forward because there's good arguments on both sides of the issue. But then over time, you're like, we actually disagree on everything.
Yes.
Like, okay, fair enough.
So we have a team that provides that for us.
Yeah. I hear that. Yes. No, totally. I know. And God bless them for it because that takes a lot.
I think it's
courage.
There's a lot of tension there, from like engineering wanting quality and us like wanting to move fast, or like, things like this. And it's not necessarily comfortable, but I think it's so important. And as long as you are respectful and like, operate in a way that's very kind and like whatever, then like that can be very healthy, and really result in a much better product at the end of the day.
So zooming out like a little bit, so you sort of got into entrepreneurship through 37 Signals. They have like a worldview around bootstrapping and like, owning your own business and not pursuing the venture capital route, which I may be mistaken. Maybe YC has changed their like strategy on this, but like the sort of Silicon Valley YC ecosystem seems to be very much about like get financing, build a huge business, take over the world. Like, how do you hold like those two maybe ecosystems frameworks like in your head and like kind of chart the right way forward?
It was super intentional for us to go raise funding. Our default was like to bootstrap.
Yeah.
But this idea is so big and so massive. Like the only way we can realize it and like give it its full, like let it see its full potential out is to get funding.
Right.
Secondly, we both had full-time jobs, we needed full-time jobs. We didn't have like lots of money that we could just quit our jobs and like go work on it. Thirdly, I was already spending a ton of time maintaining Blitz JS. And so I needed to hire someone to maintain that while I started working on the new thing. And so that was really the basis there. Y Combinator is, doesn't really like, they push you to build a big company, but they don't push you to raise lots of funding. So there's like, I highly recommend, even if you're funding the bootstrap, go through YC. You don't have to raise any more money after that. It gives you $500K to get started, and then you can like do what you want after that. But we definitely raise more, and we'll continue to raise as it makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's helpful. That's cool. I like that they're able to thread the needle there between pushing folks to build a big business and realize the full potential without having to necessitate like the raising of future capital.
And they can do that because they bring so many companies in each batch, like 100 plus companies, right? And so they have a super wide net. And so they don't have to like push every single one to like, oh, you got to go raise more money and you got to grow and like whatever. They really like, I was actually kind of surprised. So when we come in, they're basically like, what do you want to do? So in 3 months into this batch, demo day, where do you want to be? Like your numbers, your revenue, whatever. And you tell them what you want, and they're like, okay. And they help hold you accountable to that. They never are like, at least for us, we're like, oh, that's not good enough. You need to have a higher goal. We already had a high enough goal ourselves, So.
Yeah, that's probably what like they're looking for, is like that. Those are the best people to work with, like who have high personal standards. So like you actually don't have to impose any, like their standards are already probably higher than the ones you would put.
Yes.
So like, how are you navigating the fact that so your team's remote, right? I assume. Okay.
Yes.
How are you navigating the building of a remote business with your capital maybe located, on the West Coast, presumably, and your team sort of distributed geographically? Like what norms, what rituals have you kind of instituted in the course of building the company?
Well, it's super important to get everyone together in person, because there's no replacement for that, especially when you're getting to know someone. And so twice a year, we fly everyone somewhere in the world for a week-long retreat. So the first one was Canada, second one was Italy, third one was Thailand, and the last one was Canada again.
Wow, twice a year.
Yes.
Okay. What any specific times of year, or is that kind of TBD?
It doesn't really matter. It's been like February, March, and like August, September.
How do you think about the capital trade-off and the productivity trade-off of having everybody together in a week versus like shipping like that week's worth of code, doing that week's worth of tasks, what have you?
So you're either going to pay for an office all the time, or you can basically like you're either going to be doing that, or if you're remote, then you should be spending some of that money to actually flying together and getting that in person, that shared context. We always have a huge productivity boost after those in-person retreats.
Oh, I bet. Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, that's fair. Yeah. So it's probably like spike and then kind of like, yeah. That's cool. It's hard I think psychologically it's been hard for me to justify. I'm also kind of an introvert. Like I like to be alone, so it's like I have to get over that as the team scales and like get everybody together. But that's been a challenge for me personally. Oh man, I got to spend 5 days being fully dialed in and on, Are you introverted or extroverted? Do you
I'm more extroverted. I absolutely love it. The rest of the team, some of them will get worn out. They're like, I'm spending the evening alone. Like, okay, that's fine.
That's funny. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I think I enjoy being in low pressure situations, but for me, I don't know, maybe I internalize a lot of pressure. I feel like there's an expectation that have to be some sort of way as like the founder of a company, like around people, that can be some sort of pressurized for me, but it's all self-imposed limiting things.
Yeah.
Sure.
So there is some there. For me, it's like, I'm just being authentic, right?
Yep.
So I'm not like trying to be something else. So I'm just being
fair.
me, but there is extra pressure to make sure like, I'm like extra in tune, each person on the team, like how are they doing this dynamic? Like, what am I like trying to facilitate and like, are we trying to like bring more alignment and like, these sort of things. So it takes a lot of energy as a leader.
What are some of like your go-to resources for continuing education, professional development, like for you as a founder?
Number one, I have a founder coach, a really awesome founder coach. And I started working with her like right after we raised funding, before we had the product built. Cause I was like, my goal is to be at my absolute peak performance. And just like an athlete has a coach to like push them to be their very best, I need a coach who from the outside can see the potential and reflect things back to me and help me process that. And maybe sometimes it's more like a therapy role, like there's like some issue, but that has me and this company is so much better because of Angela Parker.
That's cool. How did you guys meet? And then what were your heuristics to determine that you guys were a good fit?
So I met her at a entrepreneur conference in Mexico City. Very end of the conference, last day, walking to dinner. Her and I started chatting on the way to dinner, and just like, she's just super calm and like curious about other people. And so I just like dumped my whole life story to her on the way to dinner.
Well,
like, wait, now I have to pay her so she doesn't tell anyone else.
It's sending you the NDA with the contract. Yeah. Oh,
but no, I just like felt super connected to her and her likewise. And
what do you wish I asked you that I haven't yet? What do you actually want to talk about?
Pretty much covered all the things that are important to me, starting with the number one, flying.
Yeah. Cool, man. Well, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Twitter. I'm mostly active on Twitter. Flybear. My last name is Bayer. I'm also on LinkedIn. Connect with me. I'm trying to learn it. It's really weird. I'm learning like being more like CEO, like sales marketing stuff, like trying to figure this out.
It's the whole thing. Yeah.
We are getting ready to do a V2 launch. I'm not sure when this is coming out, but we're doing a V2 launch of Flightcontrol the week of November 6th. And this is like an entirely new version of our product. I talked about liking to have fun. Well, this might be the first B2B SaaS product that you've seen that has miniature spaceships in the UI.
Sick. That's amazing.
It's really, really incredible. It's definitely like the feedback we're getting is that is the best like CI/CD deployment UI dashboard that they've ever seen by far, just because of the organization of things. And so, yes, if anyone's listening to this is even a little bit frustrated with Vercel, Heroku, Render, Railway, Fly, or Heroku, or your custom AWS setup, then I definitely invite you to take Flightcontrol for a test flight, and would love to hear your feedback.
Cool, man. Well, thank you, Brendan, for your time. The community, I think, will love this one. And it's always nice to chat with other founders that are doing cool shit.
Yeah, this has been great. Thank you.
You're listening to the Founder to Founder podcast, powered by Gun.io's Frontier Network. We release a new episode every Thursday morning, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you stream your music. Please leave us a review and share with your friends. You can follow us online at The Frontier Pod, or drop us a line at team@gun.io to get in touch about hiring world-class tech talent.